Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today, we're glad to have Sensei with us today. Glad you're here, sir. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
And we have Marla and Craig. Good to have you guys. We'll be talking about the 19th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Before we talk about the 19th verse, though, we'll make a couple of announcements. Craig, go ahead and tell us how the Tao Facebook group is doing.
Yeah, do you know, it's doing steady. If you want to get involved in the meetings, then there's the link posted to the page. If you have something to comment or contribute to past meetings as well, if you've got questions or comments, you can post it in the group and we'll pick it up and then we can discuss it. We can get Sensei's views on different things as well. So it's a great resource for people trying to explore it. And you don't have to be in recovery to join it either, which is a great thing. We're just a great bunch of people that decided to get together and talk about the Tao, but the Facebook page does quite well. You can actually join in and watch the videos as well, so you can check Amy's tattoos out.
The unedited videos, right?
The unedited video, yeah, in all its glory.
We have our nightly 9 p.m. meeting and all the other things. All of that's in the episode notes. All of Sensei's links also are in the episode notes, so you can find him. You can find his podcast, his book, and everything he's got going on. All right. Verse 19 of the Tao Te Ching. Marla, you going to read for us, ma'am?
Sure. Verse 19, translated by Jai Fu Feng. Give up sainthood, renounce wisdom, and it will be 100 times better for everyone. Give up kindness, renounce morality, and men will rediscover filial piety and love. Give up ingenuity, renounce profit, and bandits and thieves will disappear. These three are outward forms alone. They are not sufficient in themselves. It is more important to see the simplicity, to realize one's true nature, to cast off selfishness, and temper desire.
Thank you, Marla. This is Jonathan Starr's translation. Abandon holiness, discard cleverness, and people will benefit 100-fold. Abandon the rules of kindness, discard righteous actions, and the people will return to their own natural affections. Abandon book learning, discard the rules of behavior, and people will have no worries. Abandon plots and schemes, discard profit-seeking, and the people will not become thieves. These lessons are mere elaborations. The essence of my teachings is this. The essence of my teachings is this. See with original purity. Embrace with original simplicity. Reduce what you have. Decrease what you want. And then Stephen Mitchell's translation says, throw away holiness and wisdom and the people will be 100 times happier. Throw away morality and justice and people will do the right thing. Throw away industry and profit and there won't be any thieves. If these three aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course. Sensei, really interested today, sir, to see through a Zen perspective what you see here.
Well, I think there's very little daylight between Taoism and Zen. What struck me was the sort of variation in those translations. And it's not really the fault of the translators. I've been told that Chinese is just very ambiguous, that you have to read the characters in relation to each other to kind of figure out the same character in another context, as much as an English word, can mean something very different because it's connected to characters that are above and below it or something like that. But it's very ambiguous, and you have to fill in tense, whether it's past, present, future, or you have to fill in all kinds of what we would cover with English conjunctions and all the connective tissue in the English language. These little words are just not there. And so they're sort of implied. But I think this kind of would go to the precepts in Buddhism where you say, affirm life, do not kill, manifest truth, do not lie, be giving, do not steal, and so forth. So the first is an affirmative and the second is prohibitive. And that's a style of translating the precepts that Dogen gave his students. Some places only use the prohibitive. They just say, do not steal, do not lie, and so forth. But the affirm life sort of puts a positive spin on it. And do not kill, for instance, is impossible. I mean, if you're a living being, you're killing. Your body is killing other organisms all the time through when you inhale, the various defensive mechanisms in your body start killing off bacteria and et cetera. And we eat living things in order to survive. So the literal interpretation of these things is very limited. So we don't interpret the precepts as only literal, and we say we observe them by breaking them. So over time and then we retake the precepts. So over time we begin to learn the depth of their meaning. How many ways can I lie? How many ways can you steal? How many ways can you kill, etc. So they're meant to be living things, living sort of guidelines that are reflective, like a mirror, and you keep seeing your behavior in this. So do not, praise yourself at the expense of others. Do not discuss the faults of others. Those are some of the last five. The first five are more like very basic. The last five are more kind of like for disciples who are dealing with social transactions. So the four spheres, I said, he's calling these the three something. These are the three outward. What do they call them here? Wayne Dyer refers, in Dyer's book, he refers to them as the categories, outward forms. And so you're kind of caught in that, the spheres that I put out as kind of nesting spheres. These are where the personal sphere is, say we're in meditation and we have isolated ourselves. We go off in the woods or we sit in the corner of the room. Even if you're in a Zen center with a lot of other people sitting there, you're still alone. You're kind of doing your thing yourself. It looks like everybody in the room is doing the same thing, but they're all doing something different. But that's sort of entering your personal sphere. And even the meditation posture with crossed legs, it's like a tetrahedron. It looks like it would fit neatly into a sphere, The sphere would go around your knees and your head and so forth. So then the boundary of that sphere moving outward from you is like the Metta Sutta, which I think you are all familiar with, the Loving Kindness Sutra, where you start with embracing yourself as kind of forgiving yourself, your own transgressions, your own screw-ups and so forth that have been through your life. Then you reach out and embrace your most intimate friends, family, children, parents, and the next ring out, the next circle out would be people you work with, colleagues, etc., professional associates, etc., who you're on good terms with, fairly friendly. This all comes down to the idea of Sangha, community, as a harmonious group of people. Not all of the groups that we fit in or are part of are harmonious at all times. And I think it's a very Taoist principle, coming in harmony with the way. But as it applies to the social relationships where you're embracing other people, and finally people you don't know, people you don't even like, people you may hate, people who have harmed you, So the idea is this expansive embrace, all inclusive, finally embraces all of life, all of existence, the universe. So it's kind of that same concept. So I put this together, and many teachers like Uchiyama Roshi is famous now because of Okamura publishing his works. He was the same age as my teacher. They were both born 1912. But Uchiyama Roshi never left Japan. Matsuoka came to America pretty early, 1939, 1940, before the war. And Uchiyama Roshi would often speak of the self, the personal self, and the universal self. So he would kind of leap the gap from personal sphere all the way to universal. And this is kind of a Zen principle, kind of a Taoist principle. The wave and the ocean and all of that were a part of something much, much bigger that we can't even comprehend. So I thought, as a designer, I tend to make diagrams and to try to understand things. And some of you have seen my semantic modeling of the Buddhist teachings, where you build sort of three-dimensional structures of the teaching, like the Eightfold Path is a cube, 8 points. The Four Noble Truths is a tetrahedron, and so forth. And then you can talk about the connections between them. So it's kind of a mnemonic, a way of remembering these teachings, and it's also a way of analyzing them and seeing the interconnections between the teachings. So this one is a pretty brutally simple. There's the personal, there's the social, there's the natural, and then there's the universal. And I think that's related to this in the sense that he's saying that when you cross that boundary into the social and you let all of these dictates of the culture and society start to determine your personal self-definition, etc., self-identity, these are the limitations of that approach, what he's pointing out here. So
I had a question for you, Sensei. So these three that's shown, like you said, the first one would be your education and religious influences. Right. And it looks like the second would be your justice and your actions toward others.
Right, the legal system.
Yeah, and then your business, the third would be business, industry, profit, those things.
Right.
Those seem to be all substitutes for what is really real in this, correct?
In a way, but you cannot, like Matsuoka Roshi would say, the Zen person has no trouble following the sidewalks. It means you're kind of stuck in this social bubble that you've got. You can escape and go into your personal bubble, but where do you learn all those personal views? You learn them from your peers and from your parents and from your, right? So you can't really entirely separate from that. And the bit about business, that's like right livelihood. What's on the Eightfold Path, one of the 8 dimensions of practice in everyday life is right livelihood. How to make a living in a rational or just or compassionate way. You can have a little bit of influence on your social sphere. You can have Buddha had a lot of influence. Jesus Christ had a lot of influence, even though they were very powerless. And then as a leader of government, Putin is having a great impact on his social sphere of we think, a negative kind. But when it turns around the other way and comes back, when the way the social sphere comes in and dominates your personal sphere, that's what drives a lot of us to addiction and drugs. And, we can't manage, we can't control. And it's even our own families can be a huge burden to us, the people who are closest to us. So the arrows going into your personal sphere from those outer spheres are much stronger. And the impact you can have going out is really asymmetrical by comparison. And how much positive impact can you have on the natural sphere? It's becoming a huge problem.
Hey, Sensei, I was looking at that last phrase there where Mitchell said, if these three aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course. So
that would be the personal.
Yeah.
And you could say that if you go inward as we speak of in meditation, we say we're going inward, right? Then inside yourself, you rediscover these three other spheres. Mm-hmm. So as you go inward, you see how you are defining yourself in social terms. That's what they're talking about here. So there's a layer just inside, which is like coterminous with the social sphere, quote, outside, but you have taken this on. Like Baker Roshi said as a child, he said, we take vows as children because we're other directed. He said, somebody may say, you eat like a bird or you eat like a horse. And you believe it because you're other directed. So you might see yourself as eating like a bird. Then when you grow up and you're actually eating like a horse, you still see yourself as eating like a bird. So it gets out of sync, psychologically. It's not a true assessment of myself. So when you're going into the inner sphere, that first layer into the personal is still social. It's the way you have let the social influences, cultural memes and so forth, of all of your family, friends, and associates in the society affect your vision of yourself. That's what we see in politics now, this manipulation that's going on. But then when you go deeper, you find that you go from the social to the natural again. You find the biology of the body. If you do have addictive practices and you're overeating and you're becoming obese, well, that's the natural realm, but it's expressed in your own personal being as imbalance of health. Your body is not healthy, et cetera, et cetera. Then if you go further into the microcosmos, you find the genetic code, the DNA you inherited. You find, a cosmic particle can strike a cell in your body, and all kinds of chemical things can happen that trigger cancer. And so on the cellular, molecular level, down into the universal, on the microcosmic, not the macro, not the outer, but the micro, you have all of these things you can have a profound effect on you. So the four spheres are not just the personal is separate and isolated from the other three, they're also inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any comments, guys? How can we relate this to recovery?
These are all of these teachings in Buddhism and Taoism, I think, are what we call models in design. You construct a model that shows you, you take the parts and put it together and try to put it in a geometry maybe and see these are the parts of this and how they relate to each other. So they're not the territory. They're the map. They're not the territory. And they don't explain the ultimate complexity of everything. It's intentionally simplifies so you can kind of get a better grasp on it.
And it looks like here, Sensei, when they say throw away holiness and wisdom and people will be 100 times happier, that they're maybe showing us some red flags when we have substitutes for what is real.
Right.
Right. When we're putting on the outward facade.
Right.
Instead of
so Buddhism insists on no separation of the. Dogen said something like, by virtue of Zazen, Zen meditation, it is possible to transcend the difference between common and sacred. So if you have holiness, and this is a Taoist principle, I think one of the things Taoism says is when beauty arises, ugly arises. You can't have the one without the other. And so if you say holy, then that implies that there's something not holy, and so forth. So Buddhism and Taoism, I think, are on the same page here in saying that those are just opposite ends of a pole, and the pendulum is always swinging back and forth. There is no such thing as holy versus unholy. It's relativistic, and just like hot and cold, light and dark, and so on.
Yeah, we can't.
How it relates to recovery, I'm not an expert in recovery,
Yeah.
But I would guess that if you could see the influences that are causing your cravings, and in Buddhism it's broadly stated as cravings as the source of basically the origin of our suffering. maybe you could see that that's not me. That's this influence. If I could see clearly that there's something, what's happening in Ukraine today should drive everybody to drink. You know what I mean? I mean, it's horrible. I mean, how do we not just, everybody just shoot themselves in the head right now? It's a disaster.
I was thinking about the substitutes with this, because Marla, the translation you read talks about these three were the outward forms.
Outward forms.
Yes, the outward forms. And they're not sufficient in themselves. It's important to see the simplicity. In other words, to look within is what Mitchell was talking about. Stay in the center of the circle. And so I think that these may be red flags for us, that if we think outward religion and education is going to be our solution, then it's not there. Or morality, as in outward signs of that, is not the answer.
I don't think I think you could say it can't hurt as long as you have that inner strength and you have that inner sphere, and you have. So what you're doing is you're integrating all of the social constructs of what we call justice and values. You're integrating those through a very personal method. They can't really hurt you, but you just begin to see them as for what they are. They're like humanity's ignorance, and this is the best we can come up with as a justice system. Everybody knows there's no justice in human justice. That's why you have this idea of karma, that somehow time and change levels everything out eventually. But you're certainly not going to find it in human justice.
Doesn't everything even out eventually? Doesn't everything balance out?
That's kind of the theory. That's one of the theories, but it may not be in the direction you would personally like.
Well, by balance, I mean there's both parts of it. But I understand. In just reading history, things like people show up the same way, wars happen the same way. There's a cycle, but then things will balance out.
Right. Yeah. We hope so, and you see the same cycles come around again. It's like, when will we ever learn? It's like we've been through this so many times. But remember, young people haven't. 20-somethings. I mean, they're in a different world. They don't have the same references I have. I'm 80. I'm in my 80s. And I talk to young groups, and the eyes are glazing over. They don't even understand the references I'm using.
I'm just seeing all this flow of information coming through kids' heads. Something Buddy always references the Matrix. It's like all these screens with numbers not going through, but they're not really taking it in and understanding it and actually living the life. That's what I was thinking about when we were seeing, when we were reading these verses. Discard all this stuff here and get rid of that, and actually get outside and see the sun, breathe the air for a wee while, and just actually start to live for a bit.
So the big problem today, one of the big problems that comes up in science is there's so much data that you don't know what it means. It's just data. And so in design, the principle is to understand or find patterns in data. The first thing you have to do is make it visible. I mean, you could make it acoustical, but it's harder for us to sort things. We sort things out visually more than any other sense. And so if you can make this inflow of data that's coming from all sources these days, if you can make it visible and start to see patterns, then you can say you're now translating it into information. That is information you can act on. But I'm afraid that's what's happening is with the mobile media and so on, is you're getting a massive flow of data, but there's no information in it. it's not patterned. It's a blur. It's a texture, and the kids are trying to sort it out, And in Buddhism, we have great confidence that they will be able to do that, and meditation would help them.
I'm glad you said that about the flow of information, because I do a lot of work for different recovery groups online. So I've got my notifications on the phone, and my phone is constantly pinging, it's vibrating. You've got these banner alerts and this, that, and it really is distracting. So what I've practiced this week, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I didn't realize how much this was actually ruling my life. I switched all the notifications off my phone, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And Amy's sitting in on it, because I know Amy doesn't do Facebook. I can't not do Facebook because of the work I do in the recovery communities.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I wake up in the morning, I've got like 60 notifications on Facebook from different conversations going through. And I wake up and I used to sit in panic thinking that I need to get myself through all this before I get out of bed. For the past week, it's been absolutely phenomenal. Come downstairs. I always got to say, come down, do my prayers, my meditation, but I don't. I come down, grab my coffee, sit outside for a little while and just enjoy nature. And I think, do you know what? I'm not really missing this. And a lot of the stuff that is going through the groups is just regurgitated conversations and people talking about the stuff. And I'm not downplaying what we talk about, but, you just think to yourself, do you know what? I'm actually finding some joy in just not getting engaged with it, particularly first thing in the morning. I always say to people, like, don't take your phone to bed, just leave it downstairs. But I'm probably the biggest hypocrite going, because I take my phone to bed, I watch it at night time, but I stay away from the news. I've learned very quickly to actually stay away from the news. I get everything I need off Facebook. Facebook is the only, it's all this information coming through it, and I can't process it. So then I very quickly come to understanding that I'm not qualified enough to process it. I just switch it off and pick up a book.
Yep. So Buddhism teaches, and at least suggests, that we sit in meditation and we start reconstructing or reconsidering the very data that's flowing in through our senses. And, if you can get clear in that sense, then when you go back into the social realm of all this chaos, theoretically and hopefully, you can be clearer about what you're receiving, because you can see through what somebody is saying, a politician or whoever. You can see through to the motive that's probably underlying that, and typically it's fear driven, to power, driven to control, try to control. And it all sums up, in Buddhism at least, as a kind of ignorance, a kind of profound ignorance, that people are running around like chickens with their head off, responding, but not reacting, but not really responding in any real considered way. What we're doing right here, where we have this discussion, and Buddy hosts this every month, and you go back to this ancient text, and see what somebody had to say a long time ago. What percentage of the population do you think is engaging in something like this? It's going to be a very tiny percentage. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that the people we are watching, witnessing, and perhaps criticizing and finding fault with do not have a practice. They may have a belief, they may have a religion, but they may not have a practice that is this comprehensive or integrated. So, you can understand, it's like a tribe of monkeys, Monkeys have more sense.
Yeah, I was thinking too, Sensei, how maybe these three that it identifies, because the first group it identifies is education and religion, how sometimes we feel education and religion are the solution when they're not. And then we have to turn that light around, and like you were talking about with meditation, and go within. And the same with the second group. Morality, charity is not the solution either. Success is not the solution either. It says these three aren't enough.
The justice system, for instance, Buddhism would replace that with karma and say the universal ultimate justice is karma. That, as we're saying, things do eventually work themselves out. There are bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. Idi Amin dies surrounded by family and friends. He apparently was a monstrous person. But from the karmic perspective, Buddhism says it ain't over. This is not the last act. And so it's not something that's within human ken or perception that we can see. And it's not exactly a belief either. It's just a sense that, at least in your own life, it's better for you to embrace things that you think are unjust. You don't want to be a doormat. You don't want to let people attack you or your family and so forth. It's not like that. It's more like embracing consequences that come to you through your own behavior and through lack of acts of omission as well as commission, things you should have done, didn't do, and so forth. So then if you back up to the educational part, the first layer, the first outward form he talked about, Master Dogen called what we're doing in Zen and Taoism as developing true intelligence. So the educational system, what's it going to do? It's going to try to, they used to, in the Industrial Revolution, the design of the educational system was to produce good workers, right? To fill in the needs of industry and the economy. And it still, in large part, is. And what was the third one? The third one was religion and so forth. So Buddhism comes at this, and Taoism too, I think, from the personal sphere of you're not going to find it in church necessarily. You're not going to find it in somebody else. You're not going to find it in the Bible. You're not going to find it in the teachings of Buddhism or Taoism. Whatever is your true religion, you're going to find yourself.
You're going to find within, right?
Yeah. But you could say within, but from a Buddhist perspective, we say there is no inner, no outer. That's another duality that we set up, and we know what it means, but it's not absolute.
Amy, I was thinking about page 62 in the big book. It says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Though he usually doesn't think so, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. That selfishness kills us, and we always look for substitutes for surrender, really, substitutes for letting go.
Yeah. A Buddhist view on that is a little more balanced in the sense of people thank me for what I do for Buddhism, and so gratitude. A lot of people practice meditation, have a kind of epiphany or emotional reaction at some point that just feel so grateful to have found this and to be able to do this. Then they transfer it and project it onto you, and they say, thank you so much for, and I say, well, you're welcome. It's socially not proper and nice to thank somebody. But in Buddhism, it really isn't, because I do this for selfish reasons just as much as for selfless reasons. And so it isn't even that it's not selfish, but it's also not selfless. One of the old poems says, when doubt arises, just say not to. In this not to, there's neither self nor other than self. So we say not to is kind of a way of expressing the comprehensive non-duality of it. So it's nice and polite to thank people, but in a way, it's inappropriate for doing what they do. And that's another social thing. They're the heroes. They're the frontline people, the workers that get all the kudos and credits, and that's absolutely appropriate. But if you talk to each of them individually, you'll see that they have, lesser angels and greater angels, just like everybody else. They're not really heroic in the sense that, so all of these ideas are very dualistic.
And our language is dualistic in itself. It's difficult to find the words to form that. Yeah.
Well, there's a current expression that I find very useful, and say both things can be true at once. People are saying that a lot now on commentaries and so forth. And I think that's one way to think of it. You can both be compassionate, and your actions can look cruel at the same time because this person needs tough love. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But you're the only one who knows that for sure. You can't tell from the outside.
Hmm.
And addiction in Buddhism alcohol is probably one of the least damaging or harmful of addictions when you consider pride and power and status and wealth and, you know, and those things are all considered so positive, but look at the damage they wreak.
Yeah, but physically, Sensei, most of them were not killing me as quickly as alcohol was.
Right.
Killing me.
Right. Hey, killing me, and not softly with his words.
No, absolutely not. Any other comments for Sensei, guys? Staying at the center and letting all things take their course.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I have my my big book out. Of course I do, and I have so much. I was trying to keep up and thinking of references. The first one I thought of was page 48. It says, outward appearances are not inward reality at all. That was kind of one of the things that you were talking about.
I'm sorry, our what is not reality?
Outward appearances are not inward reality at all.
Right.
What I present to you on the outside is a lot of the times completely opposite than what I'm feeling on the inside.
Right.
And then no amount of intellect matters. You know, that self-knowledge. On page 40, it says he was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. I mean, that was so much of me. If I could just learn why, you know, learn the science behind it, then I can control it. But then that comes back to the control thing.
Yep. Catch-22.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. I mean, our literature in AA is just riddled through with this concept. And then, you know, the desire for more, more wisdom, more morality, more profit, you know, that drive for more of everything, more alcohol, more drugs, more feel good, more, you know, and it wasn't until I couldn't sustain that I need more, I want more, that I was able to then get rid of all that stuff. As I put in the chat, you know, take what you need and leave the rest. None of that stuff served me anymore. So
Hotel California, right?
Yes.
Everything all the time.
Yes. I really liked McDonald's translation at the end. Embrace simplicity, put others first, desire little.
Yeah, those commandments are interesting. My first reaction to them is, well, good luck with that, you know. Unless you find what you need and want that replaces the craving for alcohol or whatever it happens to be, you know, you're just, I think you have to do this. And these great teachers from the big book and from Taoism and Buddhism and so forth, they're doing their best to put into words what they have learned in the school of hard knocks, you know, what they have learned the hard way. So they're trying to help us, like helping little children across the street by holding your hand, you know. And it's wonderful and kind and compassionate, but I think we have to say, I really appreciate your efforts, but I know it's not that simple, you know. So the Buddhist take is something like, we are craving something, and we should honestly own up to that. There is something missing. And since my teacher once said, people go through life with something missing. They don't know what it is, but they know it's missing for sure. And they come to Zen to find it. And he would call it spiritual confidence, confidence in everyday life. In Buddhism, craving, you have Four Noble Truths, the existence of suffering, or dukkha. I'd rather call it dukkha because suffering is kind of a poor translation. Dukkha means something like everything is changing. We want some things to stay the same. We want some things to change that seem to be intractable and will not change. They're stubborn. But the point is, we're caught up in this inevitable change, and we don't like it. And so we call it suffering. It causes us pain and suffering and agony, and et cetera, et cetera. Existential angst, even on the highest level, is still this kind of suffering. But Buddhism takes the position that it really comes from our ignorance of the true condition of things, and that the way we penetrate to that true condition is through meditation. So you sit on the cushion, and as Buddy says, you surrender, you give up. We call it die on the cushion. That's one of the expressions we use. So if you recognize craving, it's not necessarily craving for alcohol or drugs. It's just kind of a big hole. It's just craving, period. We want something more. We want something bigger, as you were saying. We want to be happy. We want to be able to live in the face of this insanity and still not go insane. And so that's a fundamental craving. And Buddhism says that it's a craving for existence itself. That's why we're here. But we take a responsibility for being here, because if I didn't crave this, I wouldn't be here. And then I find out it's not so hot, it's got a lot of stuff I don't like about it, aging, sickness, death, But so if we craving has two sides. It's aversion and attachment. We crave those things which are pleasurable, comforting, and so forth. And drugs and alcohol work. For a while you feel great. You're good. The next day the hangover tells you overdid it, and so on.
They work until they don't.
And so Buddhism says, if you can accept this and sort of suck your guts up and, hold your craving, live with it, then maybe you'll get, past craving itself. And then anything is gravy. Anything is great, They speak of greed in the meal chant. We chant, we reflect on the efforts that brought us this food. Sometimes 52 efforts. Why 52? I don't know. That brought us this food, and consider how it comes to us. We reflect on our virtue and practice and whether we are worthy of this offering. We regard greed as the something of life, and we regard this meal as medicine to sustain our life. For the sake of enlightenment, we now receive this food. So they speak of greed. We regard greed as, I'm losing the phrase, but greed in this case is you have greed for too much rice. You want to take too much rice. And if we look at greed on the Gordon Gekko level, it just makes it look so naive and kind of ridiculous to associate greed with taking too big a portion of rice at your meal. We regard greed as the obstacle to freedom of mind. So greed is part of craving. But do you like hot, spicy food? Do you like really rich food? Do you like sauces, and you know what I mean? Or can you sit down with a bowl of steamed rice and enjoy that 100% fully? And that's enough. Oryoki is the Chinese Japanese term for the style. They eat like mama bear, papa bear, baby bear bowls, nesting bowls, little bowls and portions. Oryoki means just enough.
Amy, did you have something?
Well, I just love that Marla and I were both like, yes, I can enjoy a bowl of steamed rice. And Craig is like, no way. But I had to come to even that place in my life, right? Where, okay, do I really need more on this rice, or is the rice enough?
Right.
And that for me wasn't until like the last year and a half or so when I realized, something, this may be out in left field, but I was just thinking about how our disease, addiction, and alcoholism is threefold: physical, mental, and spiritual. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I was thinking about the three parts of this that we were reading. Could there be some sort of connection with the wisdom, morality, and profit to the spiritual, mental, and physical? I don't know.
Yeah,
it just,
of course. Yeah. And the society prompts you to dislike the car you drive, and you deserve a new car, right? And so the whole economic system is designed to create ever more craving when it just doesn't make any sense. But you go out and compulsively buy the new car, and get rid of the old car. My neighbors are making fun of me. I still have a 1998 Durango sitting out here. I call it the Beast. Try to keep it on the road.
Sensei, I appreciate you being with us today. Anyone else, guys, with anything to add? Any comments?
I would just suggest you try to integrate a form of meditation into your Taoist practice. I'm pretty sure the Taoists were all meditators.
Meditation was a game changer for me, Sensei. When I started meditating several years ago, and it's still where I see the most benefit of anything in the spiritual practices I do is the time that I sit.
I'm sure it saved my life over and over. Matsuo Kuroshi used to say, Zazen is what it's called in Japanese. Za means sit, like a zafu or zabuton or futon is couch, cushion. Za, and Zen, of course, contemplation or meditation or, Zen meditation. So Zazen keeps the men younger and the women more beautiful.
We will close with that then, guys. Thank y'all very much. And thank you, Sensei.
Everybody take good care of yourself.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.